Well, Page One is a film that's about the media desk, but at the core of the film is David Carr, and he's really how I started on this journey of trying to follow writers at the Times for a year. I spoke to him back in early 2009, right around the period when the Times and the newspaper industry in general started to really sort of go into crisis mode, and I thought that a sort of play within a play taking place inside the walls of the New York Times, where the writers on the media desk are writing about all these really fascinating stories about how the media landscape is shifting, would be a great sort of prism to look at this idea of, you know, what is the future of print media and journalism in general. And David thought it was, you know, an okay idea, but sort of demurred and said, why don't you speak to my bosses upstairs, which I did. And I think David probably assumed that, you know, it might not happen, but after about 6 months of, you know, meetings and sort of discussion about what the film would try and tackle, Bill Keller, the executive editor of the Times, said, you know, I'm proud of my writers, and I'd like for the world to see the work that they do. And that's really what this film is about. It's about being sort of in the trenches, in the newsroom, with editors and writers, and seeing how they produce those stories that we sort of see in the physical, you know, black and white newspaper every day, and perhaps sometimes we either take for granted or don't know exactly what goes into it. And so this film is just really trying to give a window into that. I was really excited to see that the writers at the Times looked at me as a fellow storyteller, and I think that really helped. On a certain level, you know, filming journalists can be difficult because they're constantly thinking of the story in their own heads, but after being there for long enough, they just sort of forgot that I was sitting on, you know, the filing cabinet filming them or standing in the corner, and I was able to sort of capture very transparent moments, I think, where they are going about their day and creating that daily miracle. Well, I'd say the shooting was coordinated 50% my just sort of showing up every other day or so in the newsroom, and then really like scheduling with them, you know, what are you going to be working on today if they're going out into the field, traveling with David to San Francisco for the launch of the iPad, to Austin for South by Southwest, to Minneapolis for conferences he attended, and you know, it was a balance between just sort of serendipitously seeing what would occur and then trying to structure things more deliberately.
I guess with any news story, the story is always continuing. How do you determine when this film's over? Because I imagine you're going to go back and still fill in some holes, or...
That's right. You know, there are a lot of timely issues in this film. We deal with WikiLeaks, we deal with the sort of launching of a paywall at the Times, and all these stories are moving targets. They're constantly evolving. And so that's where the sort of challenge comes to my co-writer Kate Novak and I, and our editors Chad Beck, Christopher Branca, Sarah Dvorkin, in terms of creating a cinematic experience where, you know, you're not just sort of chasing the ideas, but you're really connecting with the characters. And so it's all about kind of really arriving at a place where you feel like you as an audience member hopefully have enough kind of data and experience from watching the film that you can go out and sort of decide for yourself what is the importance of, you know, traditional journalistic standards as seen in a place like the Times versus the internet. Well, I think the film will have a fairly traditional release in the sense that it will be in theaters hopefully later this year, and you know, there's all kinds of distribution models online like Snag Films and, you know, video on demand on television, and those may have a role in this, but I think to begin with, the old school sort of like social community experience of going to a theater and sort of sitting in a prone position and looking up at the screen and being with others sitting right next to you, that's a very sort of valuable and special way to commune with a story. And so I feel very privileged that, you know, Magnolia and Participant have partnered to release this film, and hopefully we can, you know, have audiences experience it that way.
How do you feel about the state of the newspaper, and did you feel that, I guess with the new daily iPad app coming out through Murdoch, is that going to change the way newspapers looked at, or do you think they're just going to start out as an iPad app and then turn into a website and everything else?
Well, definitely I think that the iPad presents this sort of app versus subscription model, which is really exciting for publishers. And you know, the iPad has not even been out for a whole year yet, so the sort of aesthetic kind of way that you can experience the stories from the paper on an iPad are still being shaken out, and I think it remains to be seen how well different media companies are able to adapt, you know, the traditional model of reading it in the paper to one that's on the iPad. But I mean, the fact that the iPad presents this sort of renewal of the romance of reading and being able to move things back and forth horizontally, as opposed to the internet where we're just pushing with our mouse into stories, you know, that's really exciting.